Hello, I'm Bear in a Backpack, and today I'm going to be reviewing Blue Sheep, a recent game from indie developer Noetic Games. So, Blue Sheep is a 2.5D platform adventure game in which you play as the Outsider, a young girl who's experiencing the memories of someone who has opposed the Beast. Now, the Beast and the Influence are evil forces that seek to destroy the people of the land, and the Beast is often manifested as a nightmarish, shadowy wolf creature, and it serves as the game's main antagonist. Shortly after leaving her home, the Outsider finds herself wandering through a mystical, wondrous world, following after the one who stood against the Beast, and learning what became of him as the story progresses. The main body of the gameplay in Blue Sheep revolves around platforming puzzles ranging from simple get from point A to point B jumping puzzles, to more complicated sequences that require careful use of game mechanics introduced to the player throughout the game to be solved. Some puzzles require pushing buttons to open up doorways, or using a flower that allows the Outsider to float over longer distances than she can normally jump to, or use her dash to reach. One puzzle in particular was quite confusing, involving a series of rooms containing sculpted stone faces on the walls with either all eyes open and looking towards one of the two doors, or all eyes closed. Now going through one of the doorways leads to yet another face room, and the next doorway to another face room, and so on and so forth infinitely, with an occasional enemy showing up. So for this puzzle, the solution wasn't super clear, but, about a half hour later of trial and error, I did finally manage to get past it and find the exit. However, besides that one particular puzzle, the puzzles were in general fun and engaging. The mechanics of combat are fairly simple, as the only weapons available to the player are a wooden sword and a bow. Left click swings the staff, and a right click and hold aims the arrow while releasing fires the arrow. Now, the arrow can be charged by longer to do more damage. Enemies attack the player a couple at a time in the movement plane, with the rest of the on-screen enemies in the sidelines in either the foreground or background, cheering on their buddies in battle against the Outsider. As enemies are defeated, the others outside of combat will join the fray until all foes are disposed of. Now, there's not much in terms of variety in terms of bad guys to fight, but there is enough to keep things interesting, from some bomb-toting bullies to hulking beasts that do area of effect damage. Blue Sheep is a great example of how well-composed music aids in the storytelling aspects of the game and can really assist in the immersion of the player within the game world. Blue Sheep starts this early by incorporating flowing melodies into the menu itself, with a little piano tune playing along with each click on the menu option or back button, each adding to a sort of melody of interaction that makes adjusting something as simple as the game resolution a pleasing activity. Inside the game itself, the musical score captures the adventurous and dreamlike aesthetic of the environment and continues to complement the setting as the environment changes throughout the game. Toward the later end of the game, the music does a wonderful job of helping to convey the feeling of the characters and elicit emotions from the player as well. In the environments themselves, little sounds such as the clinking of tiles underneath the Outsider's feet as she hops across rooftops assist in bringing life to the world inside the game. In addition, the game features high-quality voice acting for the narration and story elements of Blue Sheep. One unfortunate sound-related issue, however, in Blue Sheep is that it didn't really seem like the volume controls worked 100% of the time. In certain portions of the game, the volume would be extremely loud, despite setting all of the sound levels at their minimums. Visually, Blue Sheep utilizes a stylized art style that helps bring depth to the game environment. From the lush green hills and trees in the beginning of the game to the stone temples later on, it's really quite a beautiful game. The environmental design is full of small details and accents that add to the beauty of the game, but do not distract from or obscure gameplay elements as the player is making their way through the game. The cinematic camera that follows the character around the world of Blue Sheep was a design choice by Noetic as opposed to a traditional player tracking camera that is commonly used in games of this type. Now, this was done to emphasize the narrative and story elements of Blue Sheep while giving gameplay a movie-like feel as the Outsider travels through the world. The character models used for the main characters and enemies are high quality and unique in their design. The animations are smooth and varied, and when coupled with the fun and interesting character models, provides a lot of personality and sense of life to each and every character. At this point, we're going to switch over to talking about the pros and cons of the game. So to start, we're going to look at the pros. So for one, it really has a lot of highly detailed, beautiful environment. So you start off in kind of a lush grassland with lots of trees, and you transition into more of plains, and then kind of into like a sewer-like system, and then you're going into desert. There's a lot of variation in the environments that you play the game in, and each one of them is very, very well crafted and really kind of fits in with the narrative of the story Next, the sound design and musical were very much on point for Blue Sheep. The musical score was constantly complementing the gameplay and really helping to immerse the player in the game and really kind of key the real emotional parts of the game and making sure that the player kind of felt it along with the characters in the game. It had an appealing stylized art aesthetic that I enjoyed very much. It never really seemed like the reader was just simply reading lines off a page. Whenever there was voice acting involved, the voice really kind of commanded a sense of emotion and feeling, which really gave the characters an added dimension of realism, which I thought added to the game quite a lot. Now, from the outsider to the one who stood against the beast to the wise man, there was a really good, diverse, and unique, interesting cast of characters throughout Blue Sheep. So that made it fun kind of going through the game and discovering, oh, who's this person? Oh, it's the wise man. Oh, he looks cool, and kind of discovering more and more characters along the way. Playing through the game, you get a real sense that you're kind of listening to a story and kind of interacting with it as you go. And yeah, you're solving puzzles and you're fighting enemies, but you're really being part of this narrative being told to you as you progress through the game. And lastly, the story really contains a lot of emotional depth. By the end of the game, you're feeling everything the character's feeling. You're feeling the same sadness, the same grief, you're feeling everything. And the music really also helps to kind of score that as well. And I think that's definitely a great bonus to this game. Now, unfortunately, we do have to talk about the cons of the game. Now, unfortunately, combat does tend to get pretty dry in the game. It's fun for a while, and you're kind of, hitting the little enemies across the room, and you're defeating the bad guys and making it through. But after a while, you're essentially hit, swing, hit, swing. Enemy shows up, hit, swing. Gets a bit repetitive after a while, but it's not too bad. Next, the puzzle solution would be kind of obscure. I made the reference to the face room. That was really kind of the main one that stood out as being kind of difficult to figure out the solution for. But some of them take just a little bit longer to figure out what you're supposed to do, and maybe could benefit from the use of hints now and again. Now, another problem mentioned earlier was the fact that the sound volume can spike. So a lot of times I encountered this when I was fighting like a boss enemy or something, really actually most fights in general. I would have the volume turned fairly low, so the in-game music wasn't too bad, it sounded about right, and then I go into a battle, and then suddenly just all the volume was very, very overwhelming. I had to take off my headphones and actually just play the game with my headphones off until I beat the enemy, because the volume was too much to bear, and that was strange because I had the volume settings all the way down, so that's kind of an issue that, it just needs worked out, and then it would be fine. While trying to fix the volume settings, I found out you can't actually change the settings in the game pause menu. You can only change them in the overall start menu, which is a little annoying, at least for sound settings, because you have to quit out of your current session back to the start menu in order to change your settings. Now, usually the checkpoints are pretty close to where you left off, but it will put you back to a checkpoint, not exactly where you left off. So it's a little bit of an annoyance, and it would be nice if that setting was a little easier to access when you're playing the game. It starts the game off with the outsider in her house, and you need to go to the right, and luckily most people who play PC games, you already kind of know that, okay, WASD is probably movement, so okay, D, oh okay, I went to the right, A, left, okay. But then when you get to things like combat, I was expecting, okay, well this seems like it might be more keyboard based, so F. No. E. No, E was interact. G. No. And then I realized I had a crosshair, and I was like, oh, is it click? Click. And then I swung, and I was like, oh, okay. So maybe having a little bit of something that kind of explains that before you get to that point might be helpful in this case. When you reach the final boss, there is a huge difficulty spike. Suddenly you're fighting a whole bunch of enemies at once, and although they only fight a couple at a time, when you start fighting the bomb ones, they actually kind of group together, and you'll be fighting more than just two at a time. In addition, you can get stun locked by the larger enemies that knock you down into a group of smaller enemies that can all pummel you while you're still knocked down. So I found many a time I would get knocked down and then immediately killed because all the enemies would gang up on me and kill me before I was able to actually get up and get away. So that's kind of an unfortunate part. Luckily, it does only occur at the final boss, but it is still an unfortunate place for that to happen, being the final boss. At this point, it is pertinent to share some background information on the developers Gabriel Prisk and Ryan Kratt. Gabriel always wanted to make games, teaching himself 3D art at age 13 and eventually using his talent as an environmental artist on Dungeon Defenders 2. Gabriel was diagnosed with a mood disorder that manifested in episodes of depression and anxiety. Ryan Kratt was suffering from heavy depression when he met Gabriel. Soon, the two started hanging out together and connected over their shared emotional patterns. During this time, Gabriel suggested that Ryan should focus his efforts into something to help move past his problems, as he had done to help overcome his own. Taking this advice, Ryan began learning how to program and moved in with Gabriel to focus even further on his endeavors in programming. Eventually, the two came up with a concept for a game that would deal with many of the issues that they themselves dealt with. Through this project and personal work, Ryan began to feel better, with support from Gabriel along the way. This project was Blue Sheep. Both Ryan and Gabriel hope that Blue Sheep can make a positive difference in the life of someone who plays the game. Yes, the game's combat gets a bit repetitive after a while and can be frustrating at times, but that's not really the point of Blue Sheep. It's a game whose purpose is to share a narrative and explain concepts like depression through metaphor, and in this regard, it is spot on. By the end of the game, I was choked up, sharing in the emotion that was being played out on screen and echoed by the musical score. This sadness was a good thing, as it was brought about by empathy for the characters and the understanding of the metaphors that had come to a point at the conclusion. And now for the ratings. For gameplay, 6 out of 10. For story, 9 out of 10. For sound, 7 out of 10. And for graphics, 8 out of 10. Overall, I give Blue Sheep 7.5 out of 10. Blue Sheep is a game that is worth playing for the wonderful storytelling and the unique, stylized aesthetic that it uses to do it. So, if you want to try Blue Sheep out for yourself and see what you think of it, you can go to Steam and look up Blue Sheep and you can purchase it there. Well, that's it for today's review, and if you've enjoyed this review, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to see more game reviews in the future and other gaming content.